Hey everybody, this is Marley K. Hope you all are well. Today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to talk about data, and it's going to be associated with child support and reentry. Full disclaimer, the reason that I'm having to talk about child support in context with reentry or jail or prison is because I have searched and searched and searched for data associated with men paying child support, the percentage, the number, and it's so hard to find. Like, I didn't find any sources where I could just pull the numbers and find out men's contributions, men's issues, so on and so forth. Not recent, not anything. And I find that really suspect because states track how much fees they garner from child support. Like if they do automatic withdrawal from bank accounts, they charge the person paying child support a fee. They have a cap on the fees. They know how much child support they collect. They know how many people they collect from. So it's absurd that there's no data that men can use to advocate for themselves when it comes to child support. And I did a piece earlier on this young man who had not seen his father in 26 years. He had just found his father, started having a relationship with him. The mom had lied about she wasn't getting child support, and the father had receipts, plenty of documentation demonstrating that he had been paying child support. So the young man was really upset because the mother had lied. He didn't know that his father was taking care of him or paying some type of financial support because the mother did not acknowledge that. In addition to that, there probably was some type of visitation or something uh, in in conjunction with child support, because once you pay child support, at some point you establish parental rights most times. And the mom apparently lied or made it impossible for the dad to have a relationship with the son. So he just kind of moved on, or he did move on and did not bother about being involved in the child's life. So this 26-year-old man found his father, found out he was a good dude, and found out the mother had lied. So it was really disturbing and sad because this young man had missed out valuable time with his father, but the father had met apparently his obligation for child support and still did not get to see his child, and nothing was done about it. So the father probably couldn't afford to fight, and he didn't really have any recourse because there are no resources to support men who need to establish paternal rights, and they don't have any advocacy groups that support fathers who are battling mothers who are in violation of court orders, or who just refuse to allow fathers to be in the lives of the children. All the court cares about is the child support and the money being paid, because they make money when the men pay money. If the men can't pay money, they make money from the men going to jail or prison. And so I'm going to talk about child support and reentry because this is the only reference point that I could find that I could legitimately talk about it with data. And I want to talk about it with data because I think it's a really important subject to cover. And I know a lot of people don't know where to find this information, but because I do research and review grants that have this type of data in it, it is a little easier for me to find, but this still is a challenge. And I'm going to talk through this, so forgive me for my uhs and ands and uhs. But this is it is very overwhelming because so much information, and once you get into it, you will see how the system just simply does not work for men. And again, men are all over the internet complaining about, women and the way that the system works on their behalf. It is allowed to be weaponized against men, in particular men of color, especially Black men. So we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to highlight some facts and give my commentary about this report. And I'll also put a link to this website. It is the National Institute of Justice. It's a part of the Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice. It's a division of it. And I'll also put a copy of a link to the executive summary of this report that was done, I think, in 2021 for anybody that's interested in it. And I suggest, that men, if you have children, read it. If you don't have children, you should still read it. If you're thinking about getting married, you may want to read this because, having children is a huge responsibility. If you have them in the confines of marriage, or even if you have them out of wedlock, a divorce could easily put you in a situation with child support and being unable to make your child support obligations, and then you get in this system, and are in and out of this revolving door of jail and prison because you can't meet your financial obligations. And all the while, the state and the woman are content. They will use the excuse that you got to take care of your child. They don't necessarily care if you take care of yourself. And to say that they don't know that it is a problem is a lie. So I just want to put that out there. I'm not making any excuses for any of this data. I'm just giving you straight facts, and then I'm just going to add my commentary and my 2 cents. So the name of this research is called Child Support and Reentry. It was written by Lynn Haney and Marie Mercier, published September 20th, 2021. In the past 40 years, the United States has experienced an expansion in two of its largest state systems, the criminal justice system and the public child support system. So they know, they have been tracking this. So I just want to put this out there. This is no secret. They know the system is broken and they're not trying to fix it. They've expanded child support and they've expanded the criminal justice system because it benefits the states, which in turn benefits the federal government. Continuing on. Since 1980, the incarceration rate has increased by 500%. There are now over 2 million citizens in U.S. prisons and jails and another 5 million under correctional supervision, according to a study. You see Carson 2020, that's just another study, and there's a link to this, I think. Nope, it's not. So you'd have to do your own research. But anyway, you can look this up. Every year, close to 700,000 citizens are released from state and federal prison, and nearly 9 million are released from jail, according to this same study. Of those, the majority are men of color who struggle to reintegrate with the mark of a criminal record. I don't have to tell Black people about this. We are constantly targeted, so we all understand the ramifications of coming in contact with the criminal justice system and having children, because it limits what types of employment opportunities you can have if you live in an area that will hire you at all. That makes it impossible to pay for your child support. Mass incarceration and mass reentry not only impact those who are imprisoned, but also the communities and families these citizens return to and integrate back into. Over the same period, which is the 40-year period, the child support system also expanded to 2 new levels: the federal involvement increasing to promote parental responsibility and to ensure that children receive parental support. And this is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees administration of children and families, which oversees the food stamp program, TANF, Medicaid, and all the child welfare, anything to do with child welfare. Most research indicates that the expanded child support system has worked well for divorced parents with moderate and regular sources of income. In 2016, it collected over $33 billion for custodial parents. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2016. Yet there is also agreement that this system has been less successful in securing financial support for low-income parents. Over the past 30 years, there has been a tenfold increase in child support debt. The 11.3 billion owed in 1987 jumped to 114.7 billion in 2017, according to National Conference of State Legislatures 2017 and the Office of Child Support Enforcement 2017 data. This amount is more than federal expenditures on public assistance and food stamps combined, and this increased debt has largely fallen on poor families. This basically translates to more of the country is poor than middle class, which is why this number is higher. Two, to go from 11.3 billion owed in 1987 to 114.7 billion indicates that fees and child support is being overburdened on poor people that cannot pay, and they're accruing fees and all sorts of other fines and what have you that are supposed to go to the state, which in turn some of that money goes back to the federal government, because if you receive some type of public assistance, then they tend to take that money back away from the child support and give the difference to the custodial parent. So they see here over 30 years that this is not working, and yet they haven't changed it. They keep doing it. The majority of the 5.5 million who owe this debt have extremely low incomes. 70% of the accumulated debt is owed by parents with incomes of $10,000 or less. Now, you may hear that and be like, oh, they should do better. But think about it. If the majority of people are poor, they only have a high school diploma, high school education, they may have limited opportunities in their community. Maybe they have a criminal record, and so it limits the type of employment opportunities that they have. If you're going to jail, if you've been to jail or prison and you try to get out and find work, it's almost impossible because America is punitive. They don't believe in second chances unless you're white. And it's just almost impossible for low income and poor people, and especially Black men, to get into the workforce to be able to meet the child support obligations. So the more children you have, the more debt you have. It's almost impossible. In many respects, developments in these two public arenas are interconnected. No shit. With rising imprisonment contributing to rising child support debt, and rising child support debt contributing to rising imprisonment. Parents caught in the middle of these trends can find their post-prison reintegration particularly difficult and challenging, which can then affect the ability to fulfill their financial obligations to their families, secure their own well-being, and stay out of jail. And this is something that most men have been complaining about. That's why, men like Andrew Tate are like, it doesn't make any sense for men to want to get married. It doesn't make sense for men to have children because you can't afford to live the way that the system is set up, because the system relies on men or the failure of relationships and marriages and breakdowns in families to sustain lots of this system. And the women have been taught to weaponize the system. Instead of working with the father, they weaponize the system, and it just makes the legal obligation difficult for the man to meet. There is now an emerging body of research that addresses how criminal justice and child support work together to shape reentry for this population of parents. And basically, they haven't really been doing nothing. But anywho, the paper that the social scientists and policy analysts have learned about how child support, criminal justice, and reentry are related. How do child support obligations affect reintegration? How does incarceration affect child support repayment and debt? What policies exacerbate the recidivism link? Which policies show promise in ameliorating it? These are complex questions, largely because reentry from prison is itself a multifaceted process shaped by many institutional dynamics. From this body of research, several broad findings have emerged. The first finding is that reentry goals of parents with child support debt are similar to those of other reentering groups: stable employment, familial reintegration, desistance from crime. Yet they confront distinct barriers to meet these goals. Researchers have begun to unpack the institutional processes underlying these barriers. One of the biggest obstacles to reentry is the size of a parent's child support debt, which averages $20,000 to $36,000 depending on the state and the data used. This is 2 to 3 times more than the average child support debt of other low-income parents and 3 to 4 times the average criminal justice debt of other re-entering citizens. So this is basically saying men or people who have child support debt have more debt than other people re-entering society for other reasons. Say if you have restitution because you committed some other crime, you may have a fine, but you may not have a fine that is as much as this child support debt. So child support is a huge barrier to a lot of people. There are several institutional barriers that complicate parents' economic security and familial well-being: challenges to formal sector employment, familial conflict, and cycles of recidivism. We all know this. If you can't get a good job, you can't meet your child support obligation. If you have a family issues because you can't get along with the mom calling the police on you, just constantly being evil and a bitter baby mama, or you don't have the family support, it makes it difficult for you to get back on your feet in order for you to get a job. Or you don't have the support because you just don't have people in your family who have the time or know how to get you plugged back in so that you can start meeting your obligations. And then you may end up going back to jail because you're struggling to meet these obligations, which then falls into the way of the cycles of recidivism. You keep going back to jail, so it's just a revolving door. Child support debt also acts as its own barrier, particularly if support and arrears payments are set too high for parents to manage. You know, there are some people who owe three, four, $500,000 in back child support. They're never going to earn that money. They can't open a bank account. They can't get jobs. You run a credit check. This is showing up on their credit. So it's like walking around with an orange jail suit on and flip flops everywhere you go. And you can't go on with your life when you have this type of debt and this type of anxiety and stress. So it's really challenging for people who have huge amounts of child support debt. So I'm going to scroll down to another section. How many indebted parents are there and what do they owe? So here it says social scientists are beginning to gain a fuller picture of re-entering parents with the child support debt. And they analyze data from the size of the group of parents, the demographic makeup, and the amount of child support debt. In terms of the size, estimates of the number of parents with both criminal records and child support obligations vary according to how they are computed. If measured from the criminal justice side, researchers estimate that the number of indebted parents in prison is 450,000 to 550,000. And they did some research and they cite the study here. When the jail population is added, the number rises by 700,000, bringing it closer to 800,000. although there is some evidence that the number could be as high as 1 million. Add to this estimate parents from the child support side who are not currently incarcerated, and it doubles, as the number of indebted parents with criminal justice backgrounds is estimated to be over 1 million, which is crazy. And I'm not saying that it's crazy because sometimes, things happen. You can accidentally come in contact with the criminal justice system and have a charge but never be convicted. That impacts your ability to get a job if you can't have that taken off your record, because you will have to pay for it unless you can get the state to do it, in which the state does nothing without money. And then again, because it impacts your ability to get a job, then you can't meet your child support obligations. So it's like crazy. It's just always something. So similarly, researchers know that this group of parents has an unusually large debt burden. Several factors underlie the accumulation of debt, including restrictions on prospective order modification, involuntary unemployment, restrictions on retroactive order modification. And this is just talking about, in a lot of states, they allow you to go back and have your child support orders modified. And I'll put a link to the video that I did. And if you look in the description, I put a link to where people can advocate to have their child support modified in the process by state. Support orders set by default and inputted income, retroactive child support, interest, and fees on arrears. And a lot of times, if you don't pay, then that amount accrues interest. So a lot of times people owe money they're never going to be able to pay back, because just because you can't pay doesn't mean they're not going to stop charging you interest. So it's like really difficult for people to just make it. Estimates vary in the regard to the average debt burden of this group of parents. Previous estimates conducted in the early 2000s put the average at about $10,000. More recent estimates are much higher. Based on 2018 data, one study found the average incarcerated parents' debt was $20,000, a debt that more than doubled during the incarceration. So if you go to jail because you can't pay child support, or for whatever reason, while you're in jail, your arrears are accruing interest and you still happen to be charged each week for child support. So the amount you owe from the time you enter to the time you get out is doubling because interest and fees. My research on 145 formerly incarcerated fathers from 3 states, and notice this, they say fathers, from New York, Florida, and California, found the average debt was $36,500, with some fathers owing over $500,000 in support. This means the average debt of incarcerated fathers is up to 3 times that of other low-income fathers, estimated to be between $8,000 to $12,000. What institutional obstacles do parents confront in reentry? So there are economic obstacles. The research in this area has centered on patterns of debt accumulation for incarcerated parents and their effects on post-prison employment. Overall, research shows that child support obligations and debt adversely affect formal sector employment. So now they know all this stuff works against fathers, and yet they don't do anything to make it better. So, in my opinion, fathers and men have a right to gripe and complain about this system and about how stuff impacts women, because here it is telling you for 30 years it harms men. They don't give a shit. So, you know, men just got to do whatever they got to do to protect themselves at the end of the day. Familial obstacles. Let me see if this had anything else here. Stricter child support enforcement policies are also associated with a decline in labor force participation and earnings. And that basically means the stricter the policies, the less likely the parent, the non-custodial parent forced to pay child support or required to pay child support is going to be able to pay it because they're not going to be able to work. And this is particularly true of driver's license revocation and contempt of court. So they're saying that when you take away a parent's or father's ability to drive and you strike him with contempt of court orders because he can't pay or, for whatever reason, then that harms him. That harms fathers. But they don't stop doing it. They know this. They've done studies now. You got a study from 2005, 2009, 2016, 2020. It is 2023 and they haven't done anything, which says to me they don't have any plans to do anything. And unless men start advocating for themselves, loudly create their own advocacy groups and advocate for themselves against this system, nothing is going to change. Familial obstacles. The combined effect of incarceration and child support debt puts considerable pressure on family networks, creating a unique set of reentry challenges for this group of parents. Now, keep in mind, they're talking about reentry, but because there's so little child support data out there for men who are not incarcerated, I'm just using it for everybody. It's the same thing. When you owe child support, it's a strain on the family. If you are trying to move forward with your life and start over, or get married or have another family, you can't do it because as a man you're not able to take care of your obligations, your current obligations, because your past obligations are such that it's impossible for you to move on. Child support obligations tend to be the source of tension between custodial and non-custodial parents, particularly when they remain unmet. Also, research consistently shows that support debt is negatively associated with payment compliance, particularly for incarcerated parents with large debt. These patterns of debt have been shown to influence parents' caretaking, decreasing their contact and engagement with children and in-kind support. So they know, based on this data, that men are less likely to be able to take care or want to take care of their children when they don't have the financial ability. And the custodial parent is also unwilling to work with the non-custodial parent because they don't have the money. So, it's just like the men say, the women use the debt as leverage to withhold the child, and they weaponize the child support in the court system so that the father is unable to participate, or just the non-custodial parent. I hate to say father because there are some women who don't have custody of the children, but I have found that unless the mother is egregious on drugs or homeless, chronically homeless, men tend to not weaponize custody and visitation like women do. That's just my personal experience. And I worked in social work and child welfare for a long time. So that's why I make that analysis. Legal obligations. Incarcerated parents confront unique legal barriers that make their post-prison reentry even more perilous. These include barriers to information and knowledge about child support orders in prison, order and debt modification after prison, and support enforcement measures. And that goes to, parents who are not incarcerated. Um, Men just have legal barriers in general because the system is set up for women. They don't give men the support and the help and the information they need to address or combat any legal barriers. The whole entire system is made for women. So it's just a challenge. The use of contempt actions has particularly negative outcomes, especially for formerly incarcerated parents, as it undermines integration after prison and desistance from crime. So, again, when men are faced with contempt orders and they're ruled either back in the court or they have to go to jail because they can't meet child support obligations, it helps nobody. It's not going to make the parent get any more money. It's not going to let the child get any more money. It's just a vicious cycle of punishing the man for making a child with the wrong person, I guess. Okay, so the next section talks about state policies and how those policies impede reentry. So, what keeps people from getting back to work and meeting these child support obligations? So, social scientific research on the institutional processes of reentry clearly shows that post prison reintegration can be particularly perilous for this group of parents. It is also clear that some state policies contribute to these obstacles. To the extent that state policies accelerate the accumulation of debt, restrict the modification of debt, and punish debt with reincarceration, they impede parents' reentry and contribute to negative family outcomes. Now, this is crazy. So they know this and they don't change this. And this is why I tell men that the system is designed to not care about you. They want you out of the home so that they can have the mother and the children and control them. And so that's what you're seeing over the last 40 years. You have at least two, maybe three generations of women who rely on the child support system to dictate whether or not a father has a role in the child's life. So it's crazy. Restrictive modification processes. State policies that impose restrictions on the ability of incarcerated parents to request and obtain modifications of their support orders impede the reentry process. So you're basically saying states have put in laws where if you're poor, if you're struggling and you're going through this vicious cycle of recidivism and reincarceration because you can't meet your child support obligations, you can't fix it. You can't request a modification because you can't afford it. They just want you to struggle and keep piling on these fees. So you're just a debt slave. This is true for modification both during and after incarceration. During prison, policies that restrict the eligibility and accessibility of order modification, either by defining incarceration as voluntary unemployment or by making them inaccessible, lead to much higher debt accumulations. So you see, this doesn't make any sense. If they put you in jail because you can't pay, and then they put these laws and policies in place so that you can't get a job because you have a criminal record because you've been in jail, how are you going to say somebody was voluntarily unemployed because they are incarcerated because they can't pay child support? It's the dumbest shit I ever heard in my life. It's so stupid. I mean, I understand why men are mad. Like, it's stupid. It's stupid. After prison, policies with strong restrictions on retroactive debt modification contribute to the accumulation of parental arrears. So that means these policies, they've known since 2001, 2004, 2008. They've done these studies, 2011, that these policies and restrictions on retroactive debt modification contribute to the accumulation of parental arrears. They know, y'all. They don't care. Examples include narrow interpretations of the Bradley Amendment and limited use of low-income orders. All of these restrictions worsen parents' debt and reentry challenges. So they know They don't care. They want men to fail. Interest, charges, and fees. Another reason for the rapid accumulation of child support debt for incarcerated parents or for parents who just can't afford because whatever, period, is the interest charged on arrears. The majority of states charge interest on child support debt, many at a rate of 10% or more. Research shows that interest policies are driving the accumulation of debt in these states. They've known this since 2007. The study is right here. Although the overwhelming majority of this debt has been deemed uncollectible, states continue to charge compound interest on it, thus impeding the parents' ability to get out of debt and worsening the reentry outcomes. And it's not just for reentry, it is for other parents who get behind as well. You can be sick, you can get behind, you can be laid off, you can get behind, you can lose your job because your job just ended and you get unemployment and you're not able to make your ends meet, you're not able to meet your financial obligations, same thing. Criminal and contempt and civil contempt. Although more data are needed on the effects of contempt actions for support debt, research suggests that the use of custodial punishment derails parents in the reentry process. They already know this because they have data from 2004, 2008, 2011, and 2012, and 2019. So they know. They don't give a shit. It can set into motion cascading effects that restrict parents from working, cause housing instability, inhibit the care of children, lead to job loss, and complicate desistance from crime. So they basically force you back into crime because you can't get a job in the legal economy. You have to participate in the illegal economy. So I'm not going to keep going into this, but I just wanted to point out that this information is really vague and hard to find, but this data, although it is associated with reentry and parents who um, pay child support and are involved with the criminal justice system or have been and are dealing with reentry issues, it is applicable to all men. Any man could have these same issues if they're paying child support. It's very stressful. And the one thing that this piece doesn't talk about is the strain for the men or the non-custodial parents trying to lead their lives and move on. They talk about you not being able to find housing, you can't get another job, you can't have relationships with the children and the custodial parents, but it doesn't address the social issue and the shame and the um, stress from trying to move on. You can't go into another relationship because you have this debt. You can't, you know, have any semblance or quality of life with the new partner because you got all these problems from dealing with this old person who's just might be a bitter baby mama and using the court system to harm fathers. And women know this. They may not look at it from this perspective because this is a research perspective and it tends to look at the problems so they can find solutions. Women know that they are weaponizing the child support system and child support enforcement systems against fathers. So after 40, 50 years, people have come to not value marriage because it costs if it doesn't work out. They don't want to have children because it's too expensive. And if, you know, it doesn't work out, the burden is on the man, and the man probably will never be able to live a decent life and have any peace. So you wonder why men are in the manosphere talking negatively and greasy about women and about the system and about America. This is why, there's no data available to address some of the issues that these men talk about. intentionally. It's vague, and it is deceptive, intentionally deceptive, to give women the upper hand, and most importantly, to hide the state's role in child support enforcement policies, regulations, and how they keep people out of the workforce, how they keep jails and prisons open. Because guess what? When jails and prisons are full of people who can't meet their financial obligations for child support, they're working for the state. When you go in, you're going to be doing a job. If it's a private prison, whoever is in the bed, heads in the bed, means money to whoever owns the prison. The prison stocks rise. So, it's not an accident that this system is set up this way. It's like a different form of slavery, but it's still slavery. So, my heart goes out to the men folk who are struggling in this area. Um, this system is broken. And until men begin to advocate for themselves and use this data to substantiate what you're talking about, you're not going to be able to convince anybody of anything. So, if you want to talk about this in more detail, I'll be happy to do a live. But in the meantime, please take the time to read this report. I'm going to leave it in the description. Um, if you're a man and you're dealing with child support, in my other video, I listed some resources for you, also some data. But again, I'm not a professional anybody. I'm not an attorney. I'm just an advocate, and I do research for a variety of purposes dealing with funding and social issues. So I happen to see what is happening, and I try to direct people into knowledge. And I want everyone to know that this system is broken, it is unfair, it is unjust. They know that this system is broken, it does not work. Child support is not working. The system is not working, and they don't care. If you've been looking at it for 30 or 40 years and you haven't changed it, in fact, you've made your policy stricter and worse, it means you like it. It's working for the state. It's not working for the people. It's not working for children. It's not working for fathers. It's only working for mothers who are getting that child support, and it's working for the state who benefits from the jail and prison labor. They benefit from the heads in the bed in the private jails and public jails and prisons, and they benefit from the fees that they get from garnishing the wages of people, mostly men, required to pay child support. And I want to say, I read I found something vague in a search engine that said 90% of fathers pay child support. 90% of fathers who are required of people who pay child support are men. That's huge. So that means the burden of child support falls mostly on men. Why is that? So we need to examine these systems. We need to talk about this more. And we need to begin to, those of us who um, are solutions driven in trying to get men and women back on the same page and to fix these issues, to address these bitter baby mamas and these non-custodial fathers and the issues and the anxiety associated with not being able to provide, or these conflicts because of the bitter baby mamas and the woman using the court system and child support to weaponizing it against the men. We need to have these conversations. And so leave me your feedback. I'll be interested in hearing, your thoughts about it. Again, I'm going to put the study in the description. Please read the study and read it in its entirety. Don't just go by what I say and want to come and argue about, whatever. This is talking about a problem. it takes two people to make a baby. Two people need to take care of it. And I don't believe women should be weaponizing child support and custody, keeping the father from children, and also keeping him from being able to move forward with his life, because that's not healthy for anybody either. So, y'all tell me what you think. Please like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and I will try to put a few more links if I can find some more data. I doubt I will be able to, because I looked pretty much most of the day and I know where to go hunt data. I couldn't find anything recent. So this is like the most recent report that I was able to find. And since we're having current discussions, I feel like we should have current data. I don't want to use anything from years back, but I did want to mention these statistics in this piece because it just goes to show they understand that it's a problem. They just don't care to fix it. It's broke, and it's intentionally broke. They're not often offering solutions because the solution is for it to stay broken. So men are always going to be at a disadvantage. So brothers, y'all better get yourselves together. Get together. Start talking, figuring this thing out, and do it offline. That's all I got for you. All right. I'll holler at you later.